The Mariners have hit rock bottom and something needs to be done about it. But does anyone need to lose their job over these failures? We don't think so, and we're going to tell you why on today's episode of Locked On Mariners. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Locked On Mariners podcast, brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered all season long with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline is where the game starts. It is Monday, June 20th, 2022, and thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. I am your host, Ty Gonzalez, joined as always by my co-host, Colby Patnode. We cover the Mariners over at InsideTheMariners.com for Fan Nation over on the Sports Illustrated Network. Be sure to follow the show on Twitter at LO_Mariners. Follow Inside the Mariners at Inside Mariners. You can follow me at Dane Gonzalez, CaneGnzlz, and Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. Be sure to also check out our Patreon at patreon.com/Control the Zone. We post 2 additional podcasts on there every week. And if this is your first time joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast, welcome to the show. If you like what you hear, give us a follow or subscribe wherever you're listening to this. And if you're watching us on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and give this video a thumbs up. We greatly appreciate it. So we're going to be talking about some roster moves that the Mariners made earlier today. We also have a trade rumor, a fairly big trade rumor that we're also going to be talking about a little bit later on in the show. But before we get into all of that, we need to talk about the current state of the Mariners, and they're in a pretty rough state at the moment after a 3-8 homestand, which was capped off with a 1-4 5-game series against the Angels, in which Mike Trout went off and the Mariners offense fell apart. And naturally, as any fan base would, with a struggling team, especially a team that has severely underachieved relative to its stated goals heading into the season, people are calling for the firings of the likes of Jerry Dipoto, Scott Servais, even hitting coaches Jarrett DeHart and Tony Arnrich. We're going to be talking about all these things, but Colby, I personally don't believe that anyone needs to get fired for these struggles. I do believe that something needs to change here, that something needs to be done here. I don't think that you can sit idly by 10 games under 500, given what you were hoping to do this season. But I don't think that necessarily constitutes losing, anyone losing their job over this. Do you agree?
Yeah, firings don't do anything because ultimately, at the end of the day, it's not the hitting coach's fault that they're not hitting. It's not Scott Servais's fault that they're not hitting. It's not Jerry Dipoto's fault that they're not hitting. It's the players. You got to look in the mirror and just accept it, that it's you. And firing, sometimes it can shake things up, and sometimes, it can be a wake-up call, but I don't think this team needs a wake-up call in that manner. I also don't think it's going to change anything. You're going to fire Arnrich and DeHart? Probably not. So one of them is going to remain as your hitting coach, and so who cares? You know what I mean? It's just not going to change anything. There's very little evidence, if any, to suggest that firing a manager has a direct correlation to the team starting to play well magically. It happened in Philly this year, but is that because Rich Thompson was named manager, or is that because a very talented team started to play up to their level almost immediately after Girardi was fired? It's the latter. I mean, it's just one of those things where firing somebody makes fans feel good. It makes, basically that's it. It's like, hey, look, we solved our problem because we fired this scapegoat, is essentially what firing the hitting coach is. So I don't think that's the answer. And firing Scott or firing Jerry is honestly it's one of the stupidest things I've heard from Mariners Twitter. And sometimes that's saying something. It just doesn't make any sense. You're not. Why would you take steps backwards? Because again, it's just one of those things where people think, oh, just fire the manager, and it's like, and replace him with who? Because the Mariners have a very collaborative effort when it comes to their decisions. It's not just Scott Servais. I mean, Scott has final say, but most of those decisions that he makes, they're made hours in advance, and they're made with, the direction of the pitching coach, the hitting coach, and Manny Acta and Perry
Mhm.
Hill. They all have a say in how things are run, and the analysts who work in the front office. So, what are you going to fire him, and what's going to change? Is the process going to change? No. So, what's
Mhm.
the point? And again, you fire Servais, maybe that makes you feel better now, but then this winter, you're bringing in a whole new coaching staff. You want to say goodbye to Pete Woodworth? You want to say goodbye to Perry Hill? You want to say goodbye to Manny Acta? Because that's what's going to happen, and that would also happen if you fired the GM. So, not
Mhm.
only that, but then you're getting rid of all your baseball ops guys. You're getting rid of all the development guys. You're getting rid of all the scouts. You're getting rid of all the analysts. It's just a top-down scrubbing of your entire baseball organization that you've been building for the last 3.5 years. Is just gone. And what do you get at the end of it? No more of a guarantee that your team's going to be good than you had with when you were just running things with Jerry and Scott. So it's like I said, I'm not trying to be mean. I understand the frustrations of it, but the fire Jerry or fire Scott crowd, they're delusional. I mean, there's just that's not
Well,
going to help at all.
it's just a very simple look at what is a much more complicated issue. It's a complete structural and philosophical teardown that would
Mm-hmm.
require. This isn't as simple as just changing faces, changing names, and
Right.
changing name plates on doors. This goes well beyond that. And yesterday I took to Twitter and I put up a poll, and it got 980 votes as of this recording, with 7 hours left, and 60. And I asked, how confident are you that John Stanton, the man who extended both Jerry Dipoto and Scott Servais for the second time 8 months ago, can find proper replacements? 67.4% of the voters voted not at all. 26.2% of the voters voted not really. Only 1.9% of the voters voted fully, which, okay,
They're lying.
yeah,
They
and
either
4.
they either misclicked or they're lying.
Yeah, and 4.4% of the voters voted kinda. So what this really tells me is that you should either ride this thing out with Dipoto, or you just admit that the Mariners are eternally doomed as long as John Stanton is running the show. I don't think there's any in between here. I really don't. Because this is going to, as you said, set you back in the end. Because you have to start from scratch. Yes, you are going to have the players in place. And hey, maybe you do luck out and you find a GM and a manager and a whole system that elevates these guys that you currently have on your roster. And hey, maybe you do get a GM who's able to better attract free agents to Seattle. Maybe that is the case, but there is
Right.
no guarantee that you find that guy. There is no guarantee whatsoever that you find those people and put those people in place to do just that. And so right now, wouldn't you rather have the people that have brought you to this point, that have brought you to the point of, hey, we think that we are in a position to contend, to a point where you've had one of the best farm systems in baseball and still have one of the best farm systems in baseball that can help you replenish this
Mhm.
major league roster. You have payroll to replenish this major league roster as well. So any criticisms really on that front should be directed towards ownership at the end of the day, because that's ultimately who is in charge here. Now, going back to the hitting coach topic with DeHart and Arnrich, bear in mind that both of these guys have been ingrained in this culture for quite some time. And all they are doing is teaching the philosophy of the Seattle Mariners and what the Seattle Mariners want out of their hitters. So even if both of those guys are fired, you mentioned even if just one is fired, it would just be, the other would just take over. But even if both were fired, whoever replaces them is just going to be teaching the philosophy of Seattle Mariners and what they want their hitters to do. Nothing is going to change on that front. There are going to be no
Mhm.
new ideas presented. No one is going to suddenly fix Jesse Winker or Adam Frazier other than Jesse Winker and Adam Frazier themselves. And plus,
Yeah.
blaming the coaching staff for those guys, playing at their 10th percentile or whatever it's been, It's been bad, especially for, Frazier over the last month, Winker for pretty much the whole year, especially, the more that he's pressed. That those two guys, they're all-stars. They're guys that you don't mess with. The coaching staff did not mess with them. They did not introduce them to new ideas that they've suddenly implemented, and everything has just gone off with their mechanics. That hasn't happened. When you acquire all-stars, you let them be. And Scott Servais has spoken for a long time about letting players be who they are. And that's not just from a personal standpoint. That's also from a player, a mechanical standpoint as well. You just don't mess with guys like that. So this is very much on the players. Players are just not performing. That's just it. Cut and dry. Now, should there be a conversation about, the lack of depth that this organization has right now, or that this major league roster has right now? And is that a little bit of an indictment on Jerry Dipoto, the front office, and ownership? Yes. And we can have that conversation. But the ultimate failures of this team really comes down to injuries, which are not in the Mariners' control. Jerry Dipoto didn't go out there and twist Mitch Haniger's ankle. Neither did Scott Servais. Mm-hmm. And all-star caliber players performing to their 10th percentile.
Yep.
That's what it is at the end of the day. Nothing else.
That makes it all the more frustrating because, it would be great if it was just, oh, well, Scott's just a bad manager now. It would be great if it was just like, oh, well, we just, we just make these firings that don't cost any money. And awesome. It's amazing because it's so easy to, fix it. But that's not the case. And so you want basically what Mariner fans want is they want a simple solution to a very complicated problem where there is no such thing as a simple solution.
Yeah.
There isn't. You could say spend more money. Who did not spend money on this year that they really, really need? Like big money. You know what I mean? Like Chris Bryant really helping this club right now? No, he's hurt. Marcus Simeon's finally starting to hit. Disaster the first 2 months. You know what I mean? Like they never have a shot at Seager. Javi Baez has been terrible. Like, they went out and they got Robbie Ray. And I know Robbie Ray hasn't been great, but he has been pretty good his last 2 starts, really good.
Yeah.
And honestly, Ray's been okay. Hasn't been what he was last year. We knew that wasn't going to be the case, but he's been pretty good. Like I know people are disappointed. Ray's been fine.
Yeah. Ray has only been bad relative to what the expectations were on him. And so, you look at Ray, he's been a middle rotation starter this year for the most part. Had some home run issues, but overall he's giving you some really good starts here and there and giving you a chance to win on most nights. But yeah, it has been a bit of a disappointment. Jesse Winkers has been a disappointment. Adam Frazier has been a disappointment. The fact that Eugenio Suarez has been your best offensive addition is a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you even look at guys like Sergio Romo, who was DFA'd today. That's been a problem, and you were really expecting him to come in and stabilize the middle innings. Just wasn't capable of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just when Suarez was kind of the afterthought of your off season, more or less, and he's been the best guy by far. It's a problem. And so, like I said, there are reasons to criticize Jerry Dipoto. There are reasons to criticize Scott Servais, but to just believe that you should fire them because of these minor, flaws that have all kind of culminated with things that they cannot control to lead the Mariners where they are now. Frankly, it's stupid. It really is. There is no advantage to firing Scott Servais or Jerry Dipoto. It's dumb. You're looking for an easy solution to make yourself feel better in the short term, but all you're doing in the long term is you're uprooting all the groundwork you've laid for the last 3 years. And, despite the 10-game under 500 thing, there are reasons for optimism, and there are clues that this thing is very close to turning around. And there's also a long history of teams who break out of a rebuild in a big way, and then they have a step back year, and then they go back up the next year, and that's when they make their initial run. Look at the 2016 Astros. Look at the Padres last year, right? The Padres, they're a mega team. When they win 80 games, and now they're right back to it. They're a World Series contender.
And they had
1
major
year
injuries, by the way. They have major injuries on that team. So, just like the Mariners have had as well. And other guys like Jerry Kelnick, not performing this year. And of course, again, going back to the talk about Dipoto and how, there should be a conversation had about the lack of safeguards that were put in place for guys like Kelnick failing. But, that's a conversation for another day, and I don't think that's grounds to fire Jerry Dipoto 8 months after he signed an extension and got a promotion as well, by the way. So the Mariners are enjoying a much-needed off day today after playing 11 games in 10 days, but that didn't stop them from making a quartet of moves. We're going to be talking about that in just a moment, but real quick, a reminder, this episode of Locked On Mariners is brought to you by Athletic Greens. I started taking Athletic Greens because I just don't have the time to research every single amazing thing that's going to make my body feel great, and I'm sure neither do you. So what is Athletic Greens? Well, with one delicious scoop of Athletic Greens, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging, all the things. And it only costs you less than $3 per day. You're investing in your health, and it's cheaper than your cold brew habit. It's also lifestyle friendly, whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free. And for every purchase, Athletic Greens donates to organizations helping to get nutritious food to kids in need, including No Kid Hungry here in the U.S. So right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop and a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. And to make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/MLB network. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/MLB network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. You're listening to Locked On Mariners. Thank you again for making us your first listen of the day. One live NBA draft show is not enough for Locked On, so the entire NBA channel is going live on NBA draft night. If you have a favorite NBA team, make sure you subscribe now to their Locked On YouTube channel so you get notified when they go live on NBA draft night. So the Mariners have made 4 roster moves today. They reinstated right-handed reliever Ken Giles from the 60-day injured list. He pitched 9 outings in his rehab assignment between AAA and High A. We'll get into that a little bit more in just a moment. They also promoted infielder Kevin Padlo, who was recently claimed off waivers from the Giants. Of course, he started the season with the Mariners and was traded to San Francisco before he was DFA'd and reverted back to Seattle. And then to make room for both of those guys on the 26-man roster, the Mariners DFA'd not just Sergio Romo, but also Roenis Elias. And that actually brings the Mariners' 40-man roster to 39. They did not need to DFA 2 players, interestingly enough, but they did. So now they do have an open spot there. We might talk about that a little bit later on. But Giles, of course, really bad in his rehab assignment. No matter where he pitched, it was awful. He gave up 16 runs, 11 of them earned. He struck out just 8, walked 8, and 7 in a third innings pitched. Just not great stuff. Of course, he is coming off of a right middle finger tendon injury, and that's also coming off of Tommy John surgery. He hasn't pitched in a major league game since September 15th, 2020. And we've talked a little bit about what our expectations are and how we should probably really, lower our expectations. Frankly, I don't have any expectations for Ken Giles right now. So anything that he gives the Mariners, it's kind of like Kyle Lewis, is a bonus. And whatever he doesn't give them, so be it. But to me, the thing that stands out the most about these moves is Elias being DFA'd, because I get it with Romo. You mentioned it earlier. It just wasn't working for him. He was supposed to be that guy that stabilized the middle innings for the Mariners, and he just couldn't do it. Couldn't live up to that. And it was especially rough for him as of late. But with Elias had pitched fairly well since being called up. And, when you have Tommy Milone and Ryan Barucki still on the roster. That just doesn't make a lot of sense for me. I feel like Elias gave them a bit more upside than either of those guys. But that's who they favored over Elias. And I know you were pretty upset about that on Twitter today. How do you feel about these moves in general?
Well, the Giles one was going to happen sooner than later. He has not been good on his rehab stint, like at all. So
Yeah.
that could be a disaster. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But he was running out of time anyways on his rehab. And, he at least healthy enough to pitch. And so the Mariners felt it was good enough to try and, figure it out at the big leagues, which I'm sure will go well. But that one, yeah, whatever. And obviously the Mariners needed to add a bat today. Today's the deadline that Major League Baseball randomly decided to pick June 20th. Sure, why not? For when the pitch max would drop down to 13. So the Mariners only had 14 pitchers, so they needed to remove a pitcher from their roster and add a bat. Padlo was one of the only play who's on your 40-man, one of the only offensive players. Couldn't be Sam Haggerty because you sent him down a few days ago. So he's got to wait 10 days before he can come back. So he's still got about a week to go on that. So it was either going to be Padlo or Drew Ellis. They picked Padlo. That's, whatever. It's a waste of a roster spot, but, they're rostering Justin Upton. So who's surprised? So that not that surprising. I was surprised that it was Elias, though. Elias has been objectively better than Baraki. Baraki's had his moments. He's also had some really bad moments. So it just seems like that's dumb. Tommy Malone he did a nice job, as the bulk guy. They didn't need to add him anyways. They could have just rolled with Sheffield as the bulk guy. So if Malone is past Sheffield in the Mariners' eyes, then they could just go ahead and DFA Sheffield. So yeah, I just feel like Elias is better than Baraki. I feel like he's more valuable to you than somebody like Tommy Malone, who's like, Malone's not going to pitch in relief. He's not going to pitch in leverage situations. So you're literally carrying an old fashioned long guy right now. For what purpose? I don't get, unless, maybe they're planning on, Kirby's only going to go 3 innings this next outing. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Which is something they could consider, but
yeah,
as far as we know, that's not what they're doing. So, and by the way, Elias is a guy who can give you 2-3 innings. So yeah, I don't get it. I would have DFA'd Baraki or Malone. And I also would have considered sending down Andres Munoz. Munoz was pretty good this weekend. Struck out Trout a couple times, racked up the strikeouts. He had good control for, a rare instance in back-to-back outings. And that may have saved his spot on the 26-man roster because sending him down, there are some things for him to work on. But ultimately is losing Elias like a huge deal? No, probably not. But he's, better than at least 2 guys who currently sit in the bullpen and probably more reliable than 2 others.
Yeah, it's just
so kind of a weird decision, but
yeah, it's just another weird in-season roster move by the Mariners where they're favoring a couple guys that doesn't really make sense over a guy that might actually be able to help them. Baraki has not been good since he's come over in that trade with the Blue Jays. And look, I get it. You had to, trade for him and give up a prospect for him, but it was Tyler Keenan. Who cares? Like that shouldn't keep you from, feeling the need to release him. That, like, I don't know. It makes no sense to me, quite frankly. Keeping Baraki over Elias, and especially doesn't make any sense to me to keep Tommy Malone over Elias unless they are just strictly keeping him as starting depth, but or for to piggyback with Kirby, because that is something that is going to have to be addressed at some point here is Kirby's inning count, because we all presume here that he is going to have an innings limit, and that might approach here sooner rather than later. So maybe they're trying to kind of stagger that out, but I don't know. like you said though, like Elias can also go multiple innings. You could have piggybacked him with Kirby, and you could have kept Malone in AAA as emergency depth. And by the way, Malone had been pretty good down in Tacoma, so maybe that was pretty decent depth to call upon. All things considered. So I don't know. It just seems weird to pull the trigger on Malone in general. And and especially when you had Justice Sheffield there on your 40-man roster, and like you said, if you're at a point now where you're favoring Tommy Malone over Justice Sheffield, it's probably time to move on from Justice Sheffield, quite frankly. But all right, well, this has been too doom and gloom this whole episode, just like Mariners Twitter in general. So look, you got 25 and a half minutes or so here of dooming, but we're going to try to uplift the mood here. We're going to talk about a familiar face that I think any Mariners fan loves, who has been the subject of rumors with the Mariners in particular. And we're going to be talking about that in just a moment. But real quick, a reminder, this episode of Locked On Mariners is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NHL playoffs and Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. And BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. It is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline is where the game starts. So, Colby, you messaged me last night saying that a friend of the show had been hearing that one Nelson Cruz might be on the Mariners' radar, despite them being under 10 games 500. You want to talk about that a little bit here? Because you also wrote about Nelson Cruz on Inside the Mariners about a week ago, 2 weeks ago. So this is something that you've been in on for a while here. Why would Cruz fit even now? And what do you think it would cost? And who's been saying all this stuff?
Yeah. So friend of the show, Jason Churchill, Prospect Insider, on his fantastic Mariners podcast, Baseball Things. He dropped a little nugget towards the end of his latest episode where he had heard that the Mariners were talking about acquiring Nelson Cruz from the Nationals, and that the talks had been, well, he didn't get they were or how likely they were even. He did say that he had been hearing whispers about it for at least 2 weeks. So this is something that the Mariners have at least asked the Nationals about. His resume, he really struggled the second half of last year after he got traded. Still put up pretty solid numbers, and he struggled in the month of April. But since then, he's been incredible. It really is, old school Nelson in June. And there's DH situation right now. I believe the Mariners are 30th in WRC plus from their DHs this year. And when you look at, Justin Upton and Abraham Toro getting a majority of those at-bats, even bad Nelson Cruz is probably an upgrade over guys. But I think one of the things that Cruz brings that the Mariners desperately need right now is honestly veteran leadership. The Mariners have some good leaders on the roster still. JP is great, but they lost Mitch Haniger. They lost Tom Murphy. Those are two guys who, really have the clubhouse's respect. They are the two guys who, make things okay when things go poorly. At least they were last year. So Murphy and Haniger, despite all their shortcomings, off the field, they, and in terms of some performance issues, they are guys who help rally the group of players in that clubhouse, and they've been missing now for the entire season. So Cruz is a guy who comes in, instantly demands respect. He's well established in his clubhouse, but across all of baseball, he provides handed power, which the team sorely needs. He is a massive upgrade to their DH spot, sorely needs. And again, he's just overall great guy, great for the club at the plate. And yeah, I mean, like I said, for the last 40 games or so, he's hitting 378, 467. That would be huge. Club control through next year. He does have a club option, so it's not necessarily a rental, but it could be if you want it to be. And hey, you know what? Side note, even if Cruz doesn't help, climb out of this hole, he's eligible to be a Mariners Hall of Famer, which he should have been anyways. But now they won't have any reason not to put him in. And finally, it's Nelson Cruz. Like, who doesn't want Nelson Cruz on their baseball team?
So he has a mutual option at the end of the season as well. So there's a possibility that you have him under club control for next season. So, add in that, of course, he's just a full-time DH. He's 41 years old, but he has, as you mentioned, since May 1st, he has been hitting 303, 378, 467 with a 136 WRC plus, just 5 home runs during that time, but he's walking 10.4% of the time, striking out 22.5% of the time. That he's looking more and more like Nelson Cruz as of late over the last, month and a half or so. So what do you think that would cost? Because I think the Mariners are in such deep of a hole right now that they can't really justify trading anything to, worth anything for a rental, for at least a potential rental.
Yeah, it's a tough spot to be in, just because the cost is kind of uncertain. Look, the Nationals are a team that's not going to win anytime soon, so I don't think they're going to be interested in guys with quick ETAs, right? I don't think they're going to be asking for, Taylor Trammell's or anybody who's already in the big leagues. I don't think that they're necessarily going to be willing to trade Nelson Cruz for, I don't think they're necessarily going to trade Nelson Cruz for a couple of guys who are 5-6 years away, but there's that sweet spot in there where it's guys who are 2-3 years away. I would say that for Nelson Cruz right now, based on his age and his limitations in terms of defense and all that stuff, I think anybody outside of the top 10 in the Mariners organization makes a lot of sense here. And it does just honestly depend on what the team thinks of their chances. So it's really tough to say. I would say that the Nationals probably would want somebody like Adam Macko. That's probably a bit too much for the Mariners to give up right now. So I think it's somebody. I think it's somebody who is maybe like a Will Fleming and Jonathan Clase, something like that in that neighborhood could get it done. But yeah, it's a tough, spot that you're in. But if you still want to make 2022 something, and the Mariners players certainly do want to try that, and the coaching staff certainly does want to try that, then adding a guy like Nelson Cruz, you have to do it now because the next 25 games define your entire season. So you can't wait until the All-Star break to decide whether or not it makes sense to trade for Nelson Cruz. If you're going to do something like this, you have to do it now. And it doesn't matter what it does to Kyle Lewis's at-bats. It doesn't matter what it does to Jared Kelenich's at-bats. That's the risk you run. And, hey, if you trade for him tomorrow and in 25 games you go 12-13 and you're officially out of it, you could probably still trade Cruz again at the deadline if you really wanted to. But maybe you don't. So, yeah, it's a tough price to really nail down because there are some factors like age and contract and where the Mariners sit in the standings that make it not as clean of a fit as we would like.
It would certainly be fun. And, DH rotations are only as good as the hitters that you actually have to make that up. And right now the Mariners don't have any good hitters that make up their DH spot right now. So if you want a full-time DH, go for it. Great. And if Kyle Lewis, hopefully, knock on wood here, gets back, you just figure that out. And maybe that leads to Nelson Cruz playing some first base or something crazy like that. I don't know, but you figure that out later on down the road. Right now, you just need to send a spark into this clubhouse, and you need to send a spark into this fan base. And I know quite a few people who would be pretty happy if Nelson Cruz made a return, especially some people that have been a little peeved about Kyle Seager leaving as well. So I think that would,
Yeah, the difference there is that Nelson Cruz could actually help your team.
yeah. Cruz is still, pretty good. We listed the numbers over the last month and a half worth of games for him. He's been
He can
really
still
good.
hit. Yeah.
Yeah. So on that note, that's going to do it for us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. For Colby, Patnode, I'm Ty Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow Inside the Mariners at Inside Mariners. You can follow me at Dane Gonzalez. That's DaneGnzlz, and Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode wherever you're listening or watching it. And thank you again for making us your first listen of the day, just like you do here every day. The first picks of the Ultimate NBA Mock Draft have been made. Search now for Ultimate NBA Mock Draft and get over 50 insiders, the Odyssey sports experts, and the draft experts of Locked On NBA Big Board. The 5-episode Ultimate NBA Mock Draft is underway. Make Ultimate NBA Mock Draft your second listen today. And with that, have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you tomorrow. Peace.